Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's presentation. My name is Marissa, an attorney with Legal Aid of North Carolina's Helpline. Today we have Lainey Harris presenting for us. If you are unfamiliar with the format of this event, first, Lainey is going to review a PowerPoint presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. If at any point during the presentation you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box on Zoom or the comments section on Facebook. We'll review all questions put in the chat boxes during the Q&A session at the end. Please remember that this is a public forum and Legal Aid is not representing you at this time. Lainey will go over this in more detail, but please remember to keep your questions as general as possible as we cannot provide any legal advice specific to your individual situation. The session will end when there are no more questions, and regardless of where we are, we will have a hard stop at 4:30 p.m. With all that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Lainey to get us started.
Thank you for joining us. Like Marissa said, this is our SNAP 101 Listen and Learn. And we've got four main topics that we're going to talk about today as we discuss SNAP benefits. The first are how to apply for SNAP, how to maximize your benefits, then knowing how to recertify, and also knowing your rights in SNAP appeals and hearings. So first, what even is SNAP? SNAP stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's also commonly known as Food and Nutrition Services, FNS benefits, or by its old name of food stamps. And this is a program that provides low-income households with money each month that they can use to help purchase food. This money is placed on a reusable EBT card, and it can only be used to purchase eligible food items. Again, our first topic is applying for SNAP. There are several different ways that you can apply for SNAP, and the household can choose whatever method is best for them. You can always apply in person at your local county Department of Social Services or DSS office. Every county has at least one DSS office, and some have more than one. You can print a paper application online or pick up a paper application from your office and then submit it by fax or mail to your DSS office. And you can also apply online through ePass. ePass may be an easier way for most people because it's available at any time on a computer or mobile device. If you want to apply in person, you do have the right to file a SNAP application on the same day that you visit DSS during office hours. And if you need help completing that application, you have a right to get that as well. After you submit an application, you'll be interviewed by a caseworker, and they may ask for additional information or documentation to verify your application. If you would like more information on how to apply, you can visit this website with the Department of Health and Human Services that explains in detail how to apply, what you may be eligible for. It also has copies of forms available in English and Spanish. There are some basic eligibility rules for SNAP benefits. Generally, to be eligible, you must, of course, have an eligible immigration status or be a U.S. citizen. Second, be a North Carolina resident at the time that you apply. And three, meet income rules. I will flag that for some people, there are also work requirements, and we'll talk about those a little bit more later in the presentation. These work requirements were waived during the COVID-19 public health emergency, but they have now started again, and they are currently in effect. Some more information on immigrant eligibility. There are several statuses that can make someone eligible for SNAP benefits. Broadly, if someone is undocumented and does not have any kind of immigration status, they are not going to be eligible for SNAP benefits. But lawful permanent residents can receive SNAP. They do generally have a 5-year waiting period. So they have to have lawfully been in the U.S. for at least 5 years before they can begin to receive SNAP benefits. People who have refugee status or who have been granted asylee status, as well as Afghan special immigrants and parolees, they are all eligible for SNAP benefits, and they do not have that 5-year waiting period. Not everyone in the household has to have an eligible immigration status. You can apply just for members of the household who do have an eligible status. So for example, if there are parents who don't have an eligible status, but a child who does, the parents can apply for and receive SNAP benefits for the child, even though the parents are not eligible. And DSS can't require someone to provide a social security number for household members who are not themselves applying for SNAP benefits. Here are the income rules for SNAP. As you can see, the maximum monthly gross income limit goes up with household size, and this is gross. So this is before taxes or any other deductions are taken out of wages. Many households are what's called categorically eligible. This means that they have income below 200% of the federal poverty level with no disqualified household members. And this is important because for categorically eligible households, there is no assets limit. So DSS will not ask questions about or require documentation of like bank accounts or how many vehicles are in someone's name. They're really just looking at how much money is coming in each month for the household, really from any source. Just to flag for everyone too, there is a felony controlled substance ban. This applies to individuals who committed and were convicted after August 23rd, 1996 of a felony that involved possession, use, or distribution of a controlled substance. Those folks are permanently disqualified from receiving SNAP benefits. Even if the felony occurred in another state, they are still subject to that ban. There is an exception though for people who were convicted of Class H or Class I felonies in North Carolina involving substances. Those folks can reestablish eligibility for SNAP if they meet a minimum disqualification period, which is 6 months. So if they've been released from custody for 6 months, and that if they have complied with an assessment with their local area mental health authority, they can regain eligibility for SNAP benefits. Here's some more information about those work requirements. Importantly, they only apply to people who are what's called able-bodied adults without dependents. And this is not everyone. We'll talk on our next slide about what exactly that definition means. But if someone is an able-bodied adult without dependents, they need to be working an average of 20 hours a week or be participating in a work program, again, for an average of about 20 hours a week in order to keep getting SNAP benefits. And this work can be employment for wages, self-employment, volunteer work, work in exchange for goods or services, or a combination of any of these things. So if someone is working a job for 10 hours a week, like let's say that they're a cashier, and then they also have a side gig where they're doing that for another 10 hours a week, because both of those together adds up to 20, they meet the work requirements. It also can be something like babysitting, even if it's for a family member or a friend and you're not making much money doing it. If you're spending at least 20 hours a week doing it and you're getting paid something, that counts as self-employment that meets the hourly requirements. There's also a good cause exception for people who normally, would have worked the required hours and would have met the requirements, but they missed some work because of a good cause. DSS will still consider them to have met the work requirements if their absence from work was just temporary and they kept their job. So if they get sick, if there's a household emergency, car breaks down, something temporary happens that prevents them from getting to work for just 1 month, but they're still employed and they go right back to their job, that's considered a good cause exception to not meeting the requirements for that particular month. If you are an able-bodied adult without dependents and you don't meet the work requirements or an exemption, you can only get SNAP benefits for any 3 months in a 36-month period. After that, you're not eligible unless you start working or begin to meet an exemption. So these exemptions help us to understand exactly who counts as an able-bodied adult without dependents. So these are folks who do not have to meet the work requirements because they are not considered able-bodied adults without dependents. The first is just based on age. So people who are under 18 or at least 55 do not have to meet the work requirements. People who are also within a SNAP household that contains a member under age 18 are exempt. And for this one, the minor in the household does not have to be related to the person. The person doesn't have to have any control or obligations over the minor, just that they're within the household. That's the key thing. So if there is a family with like 2 parents, 2 children, let's say one of the children is under 18, one of the children is over 18. The child who's over 18 is going to be exempt because their sibling will make them exempt. The parents will also be exempt as well. So that one minor in the household makes everyone in the SNAP household exempt from the work requirements. People who are pregnant are also exempt, as well as those experiencing homelessness. Veterans, regardless of the conditions of their discharge, are also exempt. And this is a newer change. And so you may interact with people who are veterans who previously have been told that they cannot receive SNAP benefits because they're not working. They may be able to now. Also, people who are between the ages of 18 and 24 who were in foster care when they turned 18 are exempt through age 24. And then lastly, a broad category for those who are considered unfit for employment. Those folks are not required to meet the work requirements. This can include people who are receiving workers' compensation, disability benefits, or Medicaid due to a disability. People who have also been medically certified as unfit for employment. There's a form for that DSS can provide that asks the person's medical provider to give an opinion as to whether or not they think the person can work at least 20 hours a week. It also includes people who are unable to work due to alcohol or drug addiction, people who are at least a half-time student, but there are some other special rules that apply to college students that may impact their eligibility for SNAP. And then lastly, anyone who is just obviously unfit for work based on the caseworker's observation or judgment. So the key takeaway is that if you are an able-bodied adult without dependents, you should report your work activity to DSS. If you think that you are exempt and that you are not an able-bodied adult without dependents, you should also report that to DSS so that they know that you have an exemption. And that also brings me to my second point that I always want to remind people is to never assume that DSS already has your correct and updated information. Many things can change during a certification period. So if you move, if your phone number changes, your work changes, if you start living with a child, those are all things that you should report. All right, now we're going to talk about how to maximize your SNAP benefits. This chart shows the maximum monthly benefit by household size. Importantly, not everyone who receives SNAP benefits is going to get the maximum. Their county Department of Social Services determined their particular household's monthly benefit based on their income, household size, and certain expenses. DSS doesn't consider every expense the household has, only certain ones. And when I say household, generally that means people who live together and buy or cook food together. In general, higher monthly income means the household gets less SNAP benefits, but if they have higher of those certain monthly expenses, they may be eligible to receive more SNAP benefits. So there are 2 different kinds of verifications that are involved in SNAP applications. The first are required verifications. These are necessary to determine the household's eligibility for SNAP benefits. The second are recommended verifications. Recommended verifications are optional and they're used to determine benefit levels. So you have to provide required verifications in order for DSS to process your application and determine whether you're eligible. You do not have to provide recommended verifications, but providing them may help you get more SNAP benefits. And for most people, it's in their best interest to provide those recommended verifications. Failing to provide them could cause you to miss out on SNAP benefits that you're actually entitled to. So some examples of required verifications include proof of identity if questioned, proof of citizenship or immigration status if questioned, proof of household size, proof of income, social security number for those applying, but really just if it's requested. Recommended verifications relate to those expenses that DSS considers. So this would be proof of utility expenses, mortgage or rental payments, property taxes and insurance if you own your home, medical expenses for specified persons, which are generally people with disabilities and older folks, child support payments that someone in the household makes to support a child who does not live in the household, and then lastly, childcare expenses that are incurred in order for someone in the household to work. The childcare expenses can be daycare, it can be summer camps during the summer for school-age kids, it can be babysitting, whatever childcare expense the household has that's related to working can be counted. Okay, now we're going to talk about recertifying for SNAP benefits. Have to recertify every 6 months. And DSS starts this process by mailing the household a form that has to be returned to DSS by the 15th day of the last month of the certification period. It can be turned in after that, but at that point, the household may have a lapse in their SNAP benefits. They may not receive the full next month's SNAP benefits on time because it may take DSS longer to process their recertification. The best practice, if possible, is to submit all required and recommended verifications at the same time with your application, with your recertification by the 15th day of the last month. If that's not possible, you can submit just the recertification form and then provide the verifications later. But if possible, it's best to submit everything together all at once to help speed up your process. So for example, if a household is certified for SNAP benefits from January 1st to June 30th, those 6 months, the household is going to receive notice of their SNAP recertification, probably late May, early June at the latest. And the household will need to provide their recertification form to DSS by June 15th, because June is the last month that they are certified for SNAP benefits. They need to turn it in by June 15th so that DSS has time to process everything and continue their benefits then on into July. It can be provided all the way up to the end of the month after their last month of certification. So in our example, the household could turn in their recertification as late as the very last day of July. But if that happens, they're probably going to have a lapse. They're probably not going to get their July benefits. They may even be late getting their August benefits. So it's good to submit it by the 15th, if at all possible. And the key there is that it must be in DSS's possession by the 15th in order to be timely. So if you mail it on the 15th, that's not going to be timely. It has to be actually in the possession of DSS by the 15th. There are certain changes that have to be reported during that 6-month certification period. The household has to report if an able-bodied adult without dependents stops working an average of 80 hours a month. If anyone in the SNAP household receives lottery or gambling winnings of $4,250 or more, or if the household income goes above 130% of the federal poverty level. And usually when a household is approved for SNAP benefits, DSS will send them a form, an approval notice with a chart that explains what 130% of the federal poverty level is based on their household size. So you should hold on to that so that you can know if your income goes above that during the certification period and needs to be reported. The household is not required to report an increase in expenses or a decrease in income, again, unless it correlates with an able-bodied adult without dependents who has stopped working. But reporting these changes can increase your SNAP benefits, because if you have more expenses or less income, you may be entitled to more SNAP benefits. So you can still report these changes and ask for your SNAP benefits to be adjusted. Your rights in that process. Most importantly, you have appeal rights. If you disagree with an action taken by DSS that impacts your SNAP benefits, you likely have appeal rights. And when I say appeal, I really just mean request a hearing. You should read the written notice from DSS carefully. They have to give you a written notice if they're denying your SNAP benefits or reducing your SNAP benefits. That notice should explain your appeal rights and the deadline to appeal. There are two main types of SNAP hearings, and it really depends on what the issue is. So the first are state fair hearings, and these are used for appeals involving eligibility, like if DSS denies a SNAP application for someone who thinks that they should be eligible. They're also used for benefit amounts if the household believes they're not getting enough SNAP benefits. And then they're also used for overpayments, which is when the household accidentally or by DSS's error receives too much SNAP benefits. If DSS wants them to pay that back, but they don't think that they should have to, they can request a hearing. The second main type of SNAP hearing are administrative disqualification hearings. And these are only used for cases involving intentional program violations or IPVs, which really are just fraud situations. So for state fair hearings, an opportunity for a hearing, must be provided to a household that has been negatively impacted by a DSS action. If the household wants to appeal, they need to make a clear statement that's either oral or written to DSS that they want to present their case to a higher authority. Generally, a written appeal is better because it's easier to document, it's easier to prove that you were trying to appeal. But if that's not an option for you, you can make an oral request, including an oral request over the phone. Generally, a request for a fair hearing needs to be made within 90 calendar days of the date on the DSS notice. Again, though, make sure that you read that notice very carefully because it will tell you when your deadline is. In many cases, just depending on the situation, DSS must continue the SNAP benefits at the prior level if the hearing request is made within 10 days. And these hearings are conducted by a state hearing officer who works with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. So it's not decided by someone else at your local county DSS. It's actually someone who works for the North Carolina state government. Administrative disqualification hearings are only used when DSS believes that it has clear and convincing evidence that an individual has committed an intentional program violation or an IPV. And these happen when a SNAP household member knowingly, willfully, and with deceitful intent commits a fraudulent act. So they're very serious. Some examples of intentional program violations include making false statements or hiding information to get SNAP benefits that they are not eligible for, misusing their EBT card, including selling or trading SNAP benefits, or using SNAP benefits to buy food for or share food with someone who is not in the SNAP household. If the household is being accused of an intentional program violation, they will receive a written notice from DSS, and the notice will include the date for their local county disqualification hearing. DSS usually includes a waiver form with this notice that says you can agree to waive the hearing and just accept the consequences. However, though, you do not have to sign this waiver. And as we'll discuss in just a minute, the consequences can be pretty severe for IPVs. So you want to make sure that you understand exactly what you're signing before you sign the waiver. The hearing officer for local county disqualification hearings is someone else at DSS who has not been previously involved in the case. That hearing officer must provide the household with a copy of the decision, and it often comes by certified mail. The household has 15 calendar days from the date of the decision to appeal if they want to contest it. If they appeal, the household then has a brand new hearing with a hearing officer from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And this is a new hearing. Whatever happened at the old hearing is not binding. This is a new attempt for the household to share their story, share their defense, and a new decision is made without really considering what happened at the first local county hearing. You can see the consequences of an intentional program violation can be pretty severe. If it's the individual's first IPV, they receive a 12-month disqualification from SNAP. For the second IPV, it's a 24-month disqualification. And then for the third IPV, it is a permanent SNAP disqualification. And when it says permanent, it really does mean permanent. That would be across different states. Still, you're disqualified. It doesn't matter if your situation changes, you can never really receive SNAP again. These disqualifications, though, only apply to the individual who actually committed the IPV. Other people in the household can still get SNAP benefits. So if it's a situation where there's a parent and children who are in one SNAP household, if the parent has an intentional program violation and gets disqualified, the children can still receive SNAP and the parent can receive the SNAP benefits on behalf of the children, but their allotment is going to be reduced because the parent is no longer eligible. If it's a special situation where the person misrepresented their residence or their identity to receive multiple benefits across multiple states, that's a special disqualification. That's a 10-year disqualification. Also importantly, on top of the disqualification, all adult members of the SNAP household can be jointly responsible for paying back the SNAP benefits that the household should not have received. And depending on what the intentional program violation was and how long it's alleged to have happened, this can often be thousands of dollars. So SNAP households have some pretty significant rights during the hearing process. Before the hearing, the household or its representative have the right to review the case file and records that DSS plans to use at the hearing. The household can also choose to represent themselves, get legal counsel, or have another spokesperson represent them. The household can bring their own witnesses and submit any evidence that they believe will help explain their case. They can also question or challenge any evidence presented by DSS, and they can request a postponement of up to 30 days if they need more time to prepare for the hearing or try to get legal counsel. So here on this last slide, I have our contact information for legal aid. We have our general helpline as well as our senior legal helpline. That's a 60 or older. We do help represent people in SNAP hearings, SNAP intentional program violations, as well as allotment disputes. So if you have a legal need that you think you need an attorney's help with involving your SNAP benefits, you can contact our helpline and apply for our services. I'm happy though to take questions. Again, as Marissa said, I am an attorney, but I'm not your attorney, and so I can't give any specific legal advice on your situation, but I'm happy to answer general questions or share more information about anything that we've discussed.
Awesome. So as Lainey just stated, if you have a question, you cannot unmute in this forum. So if you have a question, you either need to type it in the Q&A box on Zoom or the comment section on Facebook. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, so just going to leave just a few moments here to see if any questions come in. All right. As I am not seeing any questions on Zoom or Facebook, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to all of you for joining us, with a special thank you to Lainey for presenting. If you would like to review anything that was discussed today, we have posted a recording of today's event to our Facebook page. It will be immediately available. You can access this recording with or without a Facebook account at www.facebook.com/legalaidnc. If you would like to register for one of our other Listen and Learn programs, such as tenant rights, Medicaid, child custody, you can do so on our website at legalaidnc.org/clinics. Thank you all so much, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.